Hey everyone, I have a zip pouch tutorial for you because every few years I go ahead and I make these, especially around Christmas time, as gifts. And as I was making these today, I always forget because it's a few years in between when I do it. And then every time I have to basically reinvent the wheel and figure it all out all over again. So today when I was making these, I thought, well, I should make a tutorial for myself. I should video myself doing it so I can just refer back to that. And then I realized I could make a tutorial for everyone. So here we are, zip pouch tutorial. Now I am by no means an expert at sewing in 3 dimensions, but even I can make these. And I have lots of small studies sitting around. And if you are part of the Block Studies Collective, you too might have a lot of little studies sitting around. And so it's fun to kind of just go through them. And for these two, I took 2 small studies that I wasn't wild about. For whatever reason, I did them and then I wasn't wild about them. And here's a picture of them before. And then here they are afterwards. And especially, they just, for whatever reason, didn't captivate me. But I love how turning it into a zip pouch has really transformed, especially this one. I love this one so much. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to do it with a tab on the end of the zipper. Here it is without the tab. So it adds an extra step that you do not have to do, but I'm going to show you that. So if you have some small studies sitting around, pick one. You can make these pouches any size. And for instance, this one wasn't quite big enough when I cut it in half. So I just added a piece of this black fabric on the bottom. And that might be what I'm going to have to do to this one as well. So any size is fine. Just know that your piece is going to end up about 3/4 of an inch smaller all around than whatever you cut it at. So I have these cut at, this one is cut at 8.5 by 6 1/4. For whatever reason I have. So that's what size I'm going to be working with. So the supplies that you're going to need are, whatever it is you're going to use for the outside of your zip pouch. It could be just a regular fabric. It could be a pieced study. It could be anything. And then you're going to need a zipper. And you want the zipper to be, it could be shorter than your final piece, or it can match exactly, depending on if you're going to put tabs in or not. You're going to want some pins. And you can do this with a zipper foot, but you can do it without a zipper foot as well. And that's what I'm going to be showing you. So if you have a zipper foot, you can definitely use that. You're going to want something to poke the corners out of your bag. And so I like using this water-soluble pencil because the tip is pointed, but it's not sharp, so it's not going to poke through the fabrics. And if I get anything on my zip pouch, it'll just wash off. So that's for when you want to poke out the corners. So you're going to need lining fabric, whatever that is, and then you're going to need a small study. This is also, I have this for just top stitching around the edges of the zipper, and I chose this color because I thought it looked pretty. So first things first, I have these cut, like I said, at 8.5 by 6 1/4. So I want to make this, when I cut it in half, equal 8.5 by 6 1/4. Let's see, it measures 10.5. So I'm just going to cut it into 5 1/4 inch pieces, and then I'm going to add to it, probably along the bottom. 5 1/4, and this one should be 5 1/4, and it is. Well, it's a little bit smaller. I'm just going to give it a nice straight edge, whatever size it is. And then in order to make it reach the size that I would like it to be reach, and you could make this small, you could make this size, and that's perfectly acceptable, but I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add, a strip to the bottom of each one to make it fit the necessary height, 6 1/4. And let's see, do we want to trim them down? I'm going to trim them down after I sew on this piece. So I'm just going to kind of center it in here, attach this, and then I'll trim it all together. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of assess my piece. And I want it to be 6 1/4 by 8.5. So 6 1/4 would end right here. that looks pretty good. So I'm going to make a 2-inch bottom on this one. Let me make sure. I want this to be a 2-inch bottom as well. Doo-doo-doo. That looks good. Okay. And then I'm going to decide on 8.5. I think that's how that's going to end. All right. 8.5 by 6.25. Okay, and you know, I had, this one was quite big, so really all I did was cut it in half and trim it down and it was done. But because this is a little bit smaller than what I want it to finish at, I needed to add that piece on the bottom, and I think it'll look good. So, ooh, I love that. Okay, so first things first is I'm going to add some tabs, and I think I'll just do it out of the same fabric, you know, have this sitting around, and cut a 2-inch piece by about 6 inches long. I'm going to cut that in half, and then we're going to make our little tabs for the zipper, and this just keeps the zipper out of the seam allowance, and it makes for a smoother finish. So the first thing, oh, I love how those look together. The first thing I'm going to do is fold this over about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch. You know, I'm just eyeballing it. Give that a little press. Do the same for this one. Give that a little press. Great. And then I'm just going to fold it in half. Give that a little press. You can finger press this, but the iron really helps just make it, you know, stick together, line up really nicely. So the first thing you want to do is, if you're going to put tabs on your zipper, you want at least 1 inch of tab on either end so that, you know, the zipper's not in the seam allowance. If you're not going to use a tab, just go ahead and trim your zipper even with the piece, right? That's fine. So the first thing I'm going to do is sandwich the zipper in between this tab, and then I'm going to top stitch. I have a nice light turquoise in my machine, so I'm just going to top stitch there. And I'm just top stitching about 1/8 of an inch away from the end. Now, I want 1 inch of zipper. I'm going to trim that down, and then I'm going to trim the sides even. Great. Okay, so that's my first part. And then what I'm also going to do is trim that zipper back so that it is, you know, 1/4 of an inch from the end. You just don't need all that bulk in your zipper seam. Great. And you can go ahead and take this and kind of do a big basting stitch to hold those together before you add the tab. It just makes it so that these pieces aren't squirrely. Okay, so now that those are sewn together, I'm just simply going to sandwich this in between, right on top of my bag, just so I can get, you know, the correct placement. Great, and I'm going to top stitch that. And you can pin this in place if you want. Helps mitigate the squirreliness of this piece. Now I'm going to top stitch this about 1/8 of an inch away from that edge. Great. And then so I'm going to trim this even, the edge of the zipper. And then I'm going to peel this back, and I'm going to trim 1/4 of an inch from that fold. And now we're ready to sew in our zipper. So first things first, what you want to do is take your lining, your zipper, and the outside of your pouch, and you want to place the zipper right sides together with the outside of the pouch. And then your lining goes on top. If you're using a printed fabric, it's all right sides together. So you can pin this all together, You can use Wonder Clips if you have those. But basically you want all 3 layers to be nicely sandwiched together and held in place. Gonna ditch the Wonder Pin, but yeah, you can use those binding clips. Okay, then what we're gonna do is basically we're gonna sew it about 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, and that keeps it well away from the teeth of the zipper, which is nice. And you can use a zipper foot for that, or you can use your regular sewing machine foot. And then sew with your needle down. I'll show you why in a second. You don't need to backstitch. And my little zipper thing is about down here. So I'm going to sew about halfway through. If you keep your needle down and you have enough clearance underneath your zipper foot or underneath your sewing machine foot, you can just simply peel all this back once you've taken the pins out and move this zipper down and then keep sewing. I do not have enough clearance underneath my foot, so what I do is I simply kind of sew to the edge. Whoop. And then I take it out and then I open it up and move the zipper down to the other end. Okay, and then put those 3 layers back together, and I'm not going to pin this time. I'm just going to kind of hold them all. Then when you start sewing, you're basically going to start sewing to the right of the line and then work your way towards the line. There we go. And continue sewing on that line, and then I'm just going to hold all these 3 pieces together. So if you have enough clearance, you can just keep that needle down and move the zipper, but I do not. So I have to do that little trick and it won't show at all. And then we're going to repeat the same thing for the other side. So zipper, right sides together. And you're going to line up that edge and make sure the sides are nice and lined up as well. Oh, and I always like to start the zipper kind of away from where I'm starting to sew. And then we're going to sandwich that in there. And again, you can pin. I think this time I'll just use Wonder Clips since I'll be taking that end out to move the zipper. No need to pin that end. So that'll just kind of hold that in place. And this end I'm going to pin. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew 1/4 of an inch away from that edge and move the zipper. And then I'll come back here. Great, and I'm using just a slightly smaller stitch length, but for your first zipper pouch, if you haven't made one before, I would suggest using a regular stitch length in case you need to take anything out. Okay, yes, that's what that looks like. Gorgeous. Here we are. Okay, so our next step is we want to give it a nice good press, and you want to make sure that you don't have a fold because you don't want any of this fabric interfering with the zipper. So just one spot at a time. I like to fold these away. And then we're going to start on the front. Make sure that looks really nice. And I'm kind of pulling that fabric away from the zipper. And I have a lot of seams going on right here, so I'm just going to kind of steam that flat for a second. I'm going to move that zipper out of the way. And if you don't use pieced, you know, like a pieced top, this process, it's smoother, obviously, because you don't have all these seams in there. And then we're going to do the same thing for the back side. Don't forget the back side. Really want to get that pressed away from the zipper so you don't have any folds when it's ironed. And you can see that these aren't quite meeting up, and that's fine. I can just trim this down, and I'll just do that now. I'm Just going to trim it. It's just a zip pouch. If it goes slightly in, who knows why they don't line up completely. But I'm just going to trim those even. There we go. Great. The rest of that is close enough. Okay, so everything's nice and flat, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to top stitch. So that matches close enough. So yeah, I'm going to top stitch with this, just a 50 weight, and I'll show you that. So I'm going to move my needle right to the middle, and I'm going to sew with like a regular stitch length here, because I want to sew about 1/8 of an inch away from this edge. And in order to bypass that zipper, we're first going to open it up and move it, about halfway down. So with your needle down. When I come to the zipper, I can scooch by it when I'm doing this side. Again, you don't need to backstitch because you will be, all of these seams are going to be sewn up in our next step. Wonderful. So our next step is we're going to basically sew up the outside, and we're almost done. And right sides together. Beautiful. We are ready to sew our pouch together. Now the really important thing is open the zipper. About 3/4 of the way. You don't want it all the way over here so that it's interfering with your sewing machine foot, but somewhere around there, because in order to turn the pouch inside out, you need that zipper open. Okay, so then we're going to put right sides together. We're going to match the outside of the pouch and the lining. And basically you want the zipper to be kind of facing towards the lining, or you can think about it as the seam allowances are facing towards the outside of the pouch, right? And the first thing to do is line up. Basically, you're lining up your seams, or you can line up your top stitching right there, but you're lining up those seams from the center of the pouch out, making sure that the zipper, the bulk of the zipper is on this side. Great. Once I have that lined up, I'm going to give it a nice pin right there. Then I'm going to line up this, making sure all those edges are lined up. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So the zipper is facing that way. All the seams are facing towards the outside part of the pouch. I'm going to line up my seams so that when I sew it together, it's going to be all gorgeous. And then go ahead and pin along this entire edge. I'm going to sew with a regular 1/4 inch seam allowance. Maybe, not a scant 1/4 inch. I find that if the seams are a little bit larger, it can be helpful. Okay, so then on this side, same thing. It's all matched up, but I'm going to pin from the center out to the edge. But this time you want to leave about 2.5 to 3 inch gap right in the middle somewhere, because again, we have to turn our pouch inside out once we sew it. Okay, so I'm going to leave my about, I don't know, 2 3/4, we'll call it 2 3/4 inch gap, so that we can turn our piece inside out. And then we're basically going to sew from here all the way around, starting and ending with a back stitch. Okay, so place your needle down and definitely back stitch here so that when you turn the pouch out inside out, it won't come apart right there at that spot. And when you reach the corner, stop about 1/4 of an inch away so that you can just pivot. Take one more stitch, pivot, and keep sewing. And then when I get to this part, I just kind of squish it all down and help it feed through my machine. It's a little thick right here. Okay, so before you turn it inside out, I like to clip these corners just a little bit to remove some of that bulk. Make sure not to clip right next to that sewn, that line. Great. And then we're going to use this little hole and turn everything inside out. I'm going to clip all my threads before I do that. Okay, and this is why it's really important to have this zipper open. If you forget to open the zipper, you basically have to take it apart. And at this point, I'm going to unzip it all the way. We can really get our fingers in there. Okay, so this is where the pencil comes in handy, or like a knitting or a crochet hook, something, just to pop out those corners. Get them really nice. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing here. Once I'm going to stick my fingers through that little hole and then get into that corner. There we go. Oh, we're almost done. Okay, so then the next thing you want to do is basically we have to sew up that little bit at the bottom, right? And so you can just finger press this along, basically kind of along that seam. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew with like a gray thread that's going to blend in, just right along the edge to close up that hole. And you could zigzag along the edge. You could hand stitch this for sure, but I have found that it really doesn't show. You can't see it in the pouches on the bottom. So that's what I'm going to do. Just stitch right along that edge. You want to start and end with a back stitch for sure. And that's what that looks like. So absolutely you could use a matching thread if you have that, whatever you want, but I don't find that it shows enough. And there she is. Yay! Wonderful. So, like I said, here's what it looks like without the tabs on the side. So you can definitely do it that way. I like the way the tabs look. It just gives it like that nice little look on the edge. I'm going to pop that out a little bit. So I just want to pop that edge out a little bit. Gorgeous. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this tutorial and have fun making some zip pouches for folks over the holidays. Yay. All right. Bye.